All right, this story is pretty wild. We have really seen Vice President JD Vance throw his wife Usha Vance under the bus multiple times. Or at the very least, he refuses to defend her dignity when people on the far right fringe, like his right flank, attack her for her religion or her ethnicity or the way that she looks. I know this is hard to believe, but JD Vance isn't even the far right in the Republican Party. There is something deeper and darker that is being mainstreamed with the likes of Nick Fuentes, his Groyper movement. Tucker Carlson just did a massive interview with Nick Fuentes that has like tens of millions of views. And this far right fringe, they don't like JD Vance because JD Vance is married to Usha Vance, who's an Indian and who is openly a Hindu. And rather than JD Vance take a stand over the past few years, especially over the past few months since he's been in office, rather than him lead with moral clarity and say this type of stuff is disgusting, like the Young Republican group chat that came out just a few weeks back, in that group chat of people who were in their 20s, some 30s, some of them were 39 years old. These were not Young Republicans. That's just the name of the group. But in this group chat, they were talking shit about Indian people. They were saying disgusting, racist things about Indian people, playing into stereotypes. And the problem is, JD Vance did not condemn it. In fact, he muddied the waters. He essentially ran defense by pivoting directly over to Jay Jones, which we should also condemn. You can condemn both of these things at the same time, but JD Vance did not condemn both of these things at the same time. The point is, JD Vance has allowed this type of hatred to grow and created this permission structure. He has not taken a stand, and now it's hurting his wife. This all comes to a head when we see the other day, JD Vance speaks at a Turning Point USA event in Mississippi. JD Vance is asked about his religion. He's asked about his wife's religion. You know, he's asked about this multiple times. I mean, this far right movement, we can call them the Groyper movement or whatever, this new wave, they don't like interracial marriages. JD Vance, I guess, got married before he hopped on the new far-right train and had to change his identity multiple times. I mean, this is a guy who has changed his name 2-3 times now in order to shapeshift in his political sphere, and he will do whatever he needs to grab power. He'll go from being the never Trump guy to being the literal Trump guy, meaning he'll do whatever. He has no morals. If that means throwing his wife under the bus, that means throwing his wife under the bus. I mean, before I even play you this clip of what happened there, just know that the internet is currently blowing up because of the way that he was embracing Erica Kirk while coming on stage. Our lead policy advisor, Micah Irfan, says, honestly, I feel bad for Charlie. To have your wife publicly fawn over another man so soon after your passing is truly a tragic posthumous humiliation. And then we can zoom in on the photos a little bit. I mean, one could argue that this is a friendly embrace, but the optics of it are a bit weird. This one kind of veers from the friendly area. I mean, I thought there were rules. Like when you're friends with someone, your hand goes on like their upper back. And when you just know someone casually, you, I don't know, touch their shoulder or don't touch them at all. This is some intense stuff right here. But I mean, I'm not even here to talk about this. Let's talk about the actual problem with what JD Vance said on stage. I made a video about this yesterday, but this reads, JD Vance publicly casts his wife, Usha's Hindu faith, as a problem to be fixed, a soul to move to Christianity. She sacrificed career. She had 3 kids with him. She stood by him throughout all of this, and he wants essentially her to like fix her religion. He doesn't say that, but that's the implication right there. Let's watch these 2 clips back to back. First, I want to show you the clip where he's talking on stage about his wife's faith, and then I want to show you a clip from less than a year ago when he's on Fox News talking about the same thing. JD Vance now says that, you know, she grew up in a Hindu family, but she was never really religious. She was, you know, rather agnostic. But a year ago, they were saying, no, Usha Vance's faith heavily influenced JD Vance to become more Christian. Let's listen to this.
And yes, my wife did not grow up Christian. I think it's fair to say that she grew up in a Hindu family, but not in a particularly religious family in either direction. In fact, when I met my wife, we were both, I would consider myself an agnostic or an atheist, and that's what I think she would have considered herself as well. You know, everybody has to come to their own arrangement here. The way that we've come to our arrangement is she's my best friend. We talk to each other about this stuff. So we decided to raise our kids Christian. Our two oldest kids who go to school, they go to a Christian school. Our 8-year-old did his first communion about a year ago. That's the way that we have come to our arrangement. But thank you. My 8-year-old was also very proud of his first communion. Thank you, guys. I'll tell him that Old Miss wishes him the best. But I think everybody has to have this own conversation when you're in a marriage. I mean, it's true for friends of mine who are in Protestant and Catholic marriages, friends of mine who are in, atheist and Christian marriages. You just got to talk to the only advice I can give is you just got to talk to the person that God has put you with, and you've got to make those decisions as a family unit. For us, it works out. Now, most Sundays, Usha will come with me to church. As I've told her, and I've said publicly, and I'll say now in front of 10,000 of my closest friends, do I hope eventually that she is somehow moved by the same thing that I was moved in by church? Yeah, I honestly do wish that, because I believe in the Christian gospel, and I hope eventually my wife comes to see it the same way. But if she doesn't, then God says everybody has free will, and so that doesn't cause a problem for me. That's something you work out with your friends, with your family, with the person that you love. Again, one of the most important Christian principles is that you respect free will. Usha's closer to the priests who baptized me than maybe I am. They talk about this stuff. My attitude is you figure this stuff out as a family, and you trust in God to have a plan, and you try to follow it as best as you can, and that's what I try to do.
Okay, a few things. First of all, I find the eagerness to publicly try to sort of bend Usha's religiosity towards his path to be odd. Saying, we've talked about this in private, but that hasn't worked. She hasn't budged. So now I'm going to talk about this publicly. Now, I don't think this was meant to be, just attacking Usha Vance. I don't think he was trying to attack his wife here. I think that he's failing to take a moral stand. He's failing to provide moral clarity and saying, anything that could push back at these far-right grapers. Now, that's actually not who was asking the question here. The person who was asking the question here was the Indian woman who was featured in the video that I made the other day. But throughout this entire speech, he was being asked about his religion, his wife's religion, about Jewish people, about Jewish influence. I mean, it was obvious there was a lot of far-right influence happening here. And when Vivek Ramaswamy, when he tried to speak at one of these Turning Point USA events, like a month ago, he was Indian, and almost every single question was asked about his religion, about him being Hindu. They were just asking, how could we ever elect you as the governor of Ohio if you believe in multiple gods, if you're polytheistic? I mean, people were just lobbing questions about his religion and who he was. Let's watch JD Vance less than a year ago and his wife on Fox News talking about religion.
Tell me about y'all's faith.
I had never been baptized. Even though I was raised Christian, I'd never been baptized. So I was baptized the first time in 2018, I think. It's funny, Usha was not raised Christian. Is actually not Christian.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I remember when I started to re-engage with my own faith, Usha was very supportive.
Usha, why were you so supportive?
There are a few different reasons. One is that I did grow up in a religious household. My parents are Hindu, and that was one of the things that made them such good parents, that make them really very good people. And so I think I've seen the power of that in my own life. And I knew that JD was searching for something. This just felt right for him.
How do y'all merge two different faiths while still raising?
Really quickly, here we get to the second problem. JD Vance says on stage, he tries to downplay his wife's religiosity, her life. He says, she didn't grow up in that religious of a household. I mean, she was agnostic. He literally says that, yeah, her family is Hindu, but she was agnostic. There wasn't a lot of religiosity there. And right here, she specifically says, I grew up in a religious household. That's what's guided me. That's what's helped me. And people begin to point out very, very quickly on Twitter. So JD Vance publicly casts his wife's Usha's Hindu faith as a problem to be fixed, a soul to move to Christianity. She sacrificed career. And then people start lying and saying Usha Vance was always agnostic. And maybe she was for parts of her life, but the reporting says that Usha was a practicing Hindu and is today. The daughter of immigrants, Usha Vance says she was raised with Hinduism and continues to practice the faith. Quote, I did grow up in a religious household. My parents are Hindu, and I think that was one of the things that made them such good parents, that made them very good people. So she says she was leaning into a religiosity throughout her entire life. We also see this clip right here. Someone responds in one clip with Fox News. She says, I was raised in a religious household. My parents were Hindu. JD Vance now says, quote, she grew up in a Hindu family, but not a religious one. This is JD Vance trying to downplay how religious his wife was. He is throwing her under the bus to the far right people because he is scared of alienating the base. Well, now guess what? You are emboldening the far right base. Now, Nick Fuentes is saying that if JD Vance, he had this segment the other day where Nick Fuentes was trying to gain leverage over JD Vance and saying, we are going to mobilize, our Groyper army against you if you don't toe our line and be anti-Israel or anti-Jew, whatever the hell he was saying. This is now emboldening them to gain more leverage over JD Vance. If you wanted to have moral clarity about the situation, if you wanted to be a true leader, what you do is you stand up and you say, listen, all of these attacks against Indian people, whether they're coming from young Republicans, faceless people online, people in the Republican Party who are in positions of power, like state senators who are texting crazy things, that is not going to be accepted. That is never going to be accepted. He doesn't even have to make it personal. He doesn't have to make it about his wife. Like no one wants him to come out and say that about his wife directly, but just take a stand. He's not taking a stand. He's leaving this vacuum and he's muddying the waters, which does end up harming his wife. When you don't stand up for your wife, how are you going to stand up for the American people? I'm going to leave it there. If you appreciate these videos, drop a like, subscribe. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.